What up, y'all? I'm Benji. I'm a Link main in Smash Ultimate from Maryland. I love Smash, and today I want to talk about a topic that I think is really important in and out of the game: adaptability. In life, just like Smash, there's way too many options, and I think games appeal to people in the first place because they allow you to express yourself within limits. And, of course, there's really pretty colors to keep you engaged on a surface level too. But also, in a competitive game, in order to succeed when people are trying to understand each other and kill each other before the other one kills them, you have to be fast and rely on intuition and muscle memory on some level in order to make use of the small punish windows you have and make the most of a good situation. And of course, you don't want this to come at the cost of your patience. You don't want to see red and keep making the same mistakes over and over again, but there's not very much room for hesitation. So your rate of decision making has to be fast, even if your actions are slow with a purpose. The better and better that your opponents get, the more is asked of you, and the greater the cracks in your gameplay become. So, especially in this super punish heavy meta, there's definitely a time for things to get clinical, to hit the training mode, to tighten up specific situations. But time and time again, it's really my experience, and the same for some others that I've talked to as well, that you come back to the state of playing the game like an instrument, like a game, improvising, using your hands, using your eyes, your senses, your mind, and not getting too off track if things go wrong, which can be really scary because you don't want to make a dumb mistake and beat yourself up about it later because you knew better, but you got to let your freak flag fly a little bit, because playing too conservatively and letting your opponent get away with dumb stuff or get out of a bad situation will make you lose just as well as being reckless would. We're in such a lucky, awesome position as Smash Ultimate players that there's a real diversity in tactics and in characters used at every level of play, even at the very top. So it really seems like you can make it work your way, whatever that way is, if you're willing to put in the work. And that's really novel for a Smash game, for a competitive game in general. Link, my main, is not by any means a meta-relevant character at the moment, yet, but I continue to play him even after I've tried to drop him a couple times, partially because I thought he looked the coolest when I picked up Melee at 4 years old, and now I really like Zelda games, but also because my devotion to the character gives me identity as a player and helps me keep coming back. It gives me that emotional investment. And that's different for different people. Some people play whatever character, they switch around, whatever it is, but wherever you come from is going to dictate how you have to grow, and it's just about staying adaptable, whatever that means for you. So what does that mean in the context of the game? What does it teach us about life as a whole too? Because that's really the great thing about competitive games. We use fun and dedication to improve ourselves. But that's a lot. So I want to start concrete and talk about what it means in the game itself before zooming out and talking about the larger principles. You might have heard someone use the term refresh rate, which basically refers to how quickly you're reevaluating what's happening on the screen in front of you, what your opponent's doing, and how that reflects on what you're doing, what's happening between y'all, all of that. And in order to win, of course, you want to have a fast refresh rate. But that can be really hard when there's so much depth in the interactions and there's so much happening on the screen that can distract you. This can definitely be where the pretty colors become a bit of a problem. But don't get frozen here, just take a step, and it can be anything. This is only one approach, but something I really like to do when I'm practicing at home is to literally talk to myself while I'm playing the game. Not just about any old thing, but I found it really helpful to say aloud what I'm noticing and what has been happening in real time while I'm playing. And I mean it in a really intuitive, simple sense. I'll be staring at the screen and saying to myself, like, okay, I threw the boomerang from about halfway across the stage. They short hopped over it. Okay, there's their double jump. I backed up so I wasn't able to punish their landing, so on and so on. And in the short term, the multitasking can definitely make you slower. But if you try this, I really think you'll find, and much faster than you expect, that it makes your rate of adaptation faster than your opponent's, and certainly faster than yours was before. Next time they use their double jump, because you heard yourself talk about it really explicitly, you heard it out of your mouth and into your ears, you're going to react faster. You're going to realize what's happening. Your refresh rate is going to improve because you know what to expect, and then you'll notice when they change, helping you build an abstract idea in your head of how your opponent thinks, which is the most important thing for making reads. And before you know it, you'll be making crazy call outs like, how did I know they were going to do that? It just came out naturally without hesitation. Your hands are almost thinking for you, but in a good way. I really love this approach because it makes it crystal clear what you notice and what you don't, and you're going to use that information you get about yourself to get better at the game. I know this can seem kind of silly, but try not to judge yourself as you're doing it and just stick with it for a second. I don't think it's going to make you worse for more than an interaction or two before you realize that your rate of adaptation is improving and you're playing with more presence of mind while your opponent is making the same mistakes over and over again. And I think that relief of breaking the cycle of repeated mistakes and giving yourself the small reward of getting the hit of a positive outcome for your efforts immediately will keep you coming back. Now, of course, this isn't extremely practical in a tournament environment where it would seem really weird and disruptive to be talking to yourself out loud, but doing it at home builds really good habits. And I still do it in my head in a tournament. And even if your inner monologue is more nervous or distracted when you're competing in a public setting and it's down to the wire, by practicing this at home, you'll have raised the quality of your average decision. And that's the goal. Over time, you're going to get faster and more seamless whether you're thinking about it or not, but you'll always be able to come back to this approach when things feel like they're repeating themselves. This tactic, to me, it's all about not censoring yourself. You have to let what you notice flow out of your mouth without filter. Doing it in real time while you play is going to make sure that you don't overthink it too much. Your ideas don't have to be specific if you're not noticing specific things. Wherever you're at emotionally must be okay, because that's what it is. There's no point in faking it. Just get better from where you are now, because if you're getting hit, then clearly something you're doing isn't working. You can get broad if you're out of ideas. Just say what's true. If you're sad or confused or frustrated while you're playing, validate it by giving it air, and you really might be surprised by how quickly those feelings dissipate. You might say to yourself, I'm not sure why I was dying so much last game, but they seem to be playing really confidently. You might hear yourself say that, and you keep going. Okay, well, what does it mean that they're playing confidently? I guess by that, I mean they're swinging out of the air a lot. When you hear yourself say that, almost like a question, you might think, oh, okay, I guess I can hit them into the air and then shield their move that they throw out and then punish after. You're off to the races. You're good. You got momentum. You will be surprised. There's counterplay to everything, and empowering yourself to not feel defeated or out of options in a very mashy game will get the ball rolling. By doing this or anything like it, you'll be building the momentum of having a play style that is inherently adaptable, quickening your refresh rate, and building self-confidence. It was your ideas, what you noticed, that got you somewhere new, and the improvement gives you a boost in motivation. It becomes a cycle. Because you're doing it in real time, there's no room to notice anything other than what you notice, because you want to keep playing while you're talking too. And if you find yourself hitting a bottleneck still after going through this process, you can better identify if that bottleneck is a technical one. You need to practice preparing a punch for that situation rather than an issue of awareness. But I really do think, and I found to be the case when you do this, you might be capable of more than you think that you are. You might know more about your character, about the game, than you think that you do. And this will help you be consistent in using the technical things that you've prepared, because you'll be more aware of where to put them. Again, overall, the most important skill this works with is your emotional intelligence. You'll be making reads because you're building a subconscious framework in your head for how your opponent thinks and how they see you. This is funny because you're doing it your way, but almost taking yourself out of the equation by putting yourself in their shoes. And in order to do that, you also have to keep your eyes, locked on the opponent. But playing around what your opponent does will lend simplicity to your gameplay, and doing so relies on your feelings and your senses. Something will come. This is only one approach, and it's certainly not a cure-all. But if it's not for you, try something else. Even if it's fishing for a combo or standing still, not jumping in neutral. That's something I've heard people talk about, and it's something I really like to try too as an exercise. Anything that breaks the pace of repeating the same mistakes you've been repeating, if you're willing to just not press those buttons, is really, really empowering and starts that positive feedback loop. So with that, let's zoom out and see how these principles apply outside of the game and blossom, and then can feed back into your gameplay too. Pressures to compete and succeed can vary a lot across disciplines and across cultures too, but most people play video games because they're fun, and a lot of people share similar stories for why they started playing Smash or whatever your game of choice is. Maybe you thought it was particularly fun, and then as you got more serious and it started to get wrapped up in your identity, your ego gets attached to it. Results matter. If they didn't, people wouldn't go to tournaments in the first place. But if you do compete, it can be a really easy trap to fall into for your results, one tournament to the next, to affect your self-worth. If this is what you like to do the most, and you spend a lot of time doing it, and you're not succeeding in the way that you want, what does that say about your ability to spend your time wisely, about your intelligence, about your talent, all of that? And I think the really tough thing is, the longer you spend in this sort of self-punishing cycle, the harder it can feel to break out of. It can be super, super tough when you're in the spot, but I think the most important thing to do here, just like we talked about in the literal gameplay, is to slow down so you can speed up. I find this really tough when I'm trying to bully my mind into improving, to take that breath, to take my hands off the controller. But it's really best to do a little when you feel like a lot is being asked of you. You got to just take a step in any direction other than the narrow one you've been throwing yourself down. Just don't keep beating your head against the wall in Elite Smash or whatever it is. Do something different. You can try tactics like talking to yourself during gameplay, as we already discussed, but it can be anything. You can watch your replays. You can watch another player of your character or of another character. You can talk to your friends about the game. You can get a lesson from somebody else, maybe on Medify or wherever else. And now here, actually, I think we get somewhere particularly interesting, because good players will often start a lesson by asking you about your goals. And this is key, in my opinion. You want to be the best in the world? Great. But what about to be the best in your region first? What about winning a set in a tournament first? What about just going to your first tournament? It all depends on where you're at. I've heard improvement described as a stone-by-stone process, and I think this really, really holds true. This is anecdotal and a deeper topic in itself, but I think it can be helpful to talk about, so I want to tell a story about my life. About 3 years ago, I started running. I had tried and failed many times to make a change when shame built up or I got inspired in the past, but nothing had stuck. I would always make a big effort or do something that somebody else was telling me to do, and it wouldn't last. So I feel like at a certain point in quarantine, I got fed up, and fed up with being repeatedly fed up too, and felt for myself that it was worth taking a slightly gentler approach if it meant that I could keep it up. I had proven to myself in the past that trying to make a big change all at once led to nothing in the long term, so I chose to make a small change that might grow over time. I just felt like I had nothing to lose, and I had no particular goal other than to build a habit, to change the path that I was going down. Fast forward a few years, and I just completed my first half marathon, woohoo! But far more than that one milestone, I felt really, really proud of the accomplishment of having been consistent enough to get there. I found out about the run only a couple days prior to it, which I don't recommend, by the way, but I had worked up from half a mile a day when I first started to more than that, with many little goals along the way, which meant that I could safely do it with only a little push and training at the end right before it. The progress certainly wasn't linear, and at times still it feels like I'm getting worse on a day-to-day basis, or getting slower, but I push myself a little at a time, and go to physical therapy when things start to hurt, so I make sure I can keep doing it. And suddenly I look back and I'm definitely somewhere different than when I started. I don't know if I'm going to keep this up forever. It's not really about running, which might seem easy to say, but all I know is that if I had set out initially with an arbitrarily lofty goal, it would have been way too daunting to keep up the training. For me, anyway. Maybe it would work for some others. Big goals and dreams are what keep the magic alive, and they're really, really excellent. But I've often found that if I actually want to reach somewhere else, if I want to achieve some goal, it's often a matter of a little bit over a long time or nothing that sticks really at all. So choose a little over a long time, If only I could take that advice all the time. But anyway, thank you very much for going there with me. Let's come back to Smash now. So say you've put in a lot of work and you've gotten better, different from where you started, but you find yourself plateauing again. And I think it's natural to ask yourself if putting in the work it would take to break that ceiling is worth it for you where you are now, not where you were when you started. But you do have to reflect on what the game has given you and why you started in the first place. Did you just want to be around other good players and be part of the community? Well, maybe you're already there. It's really important to ask yourself what you need to stay happy, to stay curious, because otherwise you're just going to stagnate and you're going to start to resent the game too. Maybe it's time to focus on something else in your life and let the game take a back seat until it makes more sense. The goal of beginning to play was to be happy. And we all know you're not making any money in Smash, so if it's not making you happy, something's not working. It's become a cage of your own design. Now, I'm not suggesting you drop something on a dime if you're not having fun one night. There's a ton of value in having a craft over a long period of time that grows with you. And the idea of having a singular passion is really attractive. And you totally need to be immersed in something to truly improve. That's all true. But just like anything in life, if you're in a romantic relationship and you don't have any other friends, that's going to put a lot of strain on your partnership. I think the same thing holds true here. Not having other interests outside of Smash can make the well of inspiration run dry. Your needs are different at different points if you want to improve in your life and in the game too. If you've been playing a lot and you've gotten stuck, maybe get more specific in your approach. And if you don't want to, maybe step away and let the itch to play return. It always does. Maybe you've taken a break from the game and you're coming back and you're not sure what you really need to do. Maybe it's the right time to just play a bunch and let your muscle memory come back before getting into the weeds. Just have fun. And maybe, as much as you might want to, it's not the time to throw yourself into a tournament. You have to think your goal is to be with this game for a long time, to get better, not to just be a flash in the pan. Or if you do go to a tournament, know that your goal is to just play all night, focus, get your friendlies in, get your mojo back. You might not win, and that's okay. I think in a large sense, you have to make it as easy for yourself as possible if you really care. This will keep you coming back. This doesn't mean don't work hard and don't think hard, but in anything, consistency is key in bearing the greatest fruit. At least right now, Lucina is better than Marth. Now I'd like to see somebody make it work with him, but generally, these lessons to me are what is so great about fighting games. So take a step. It can be anything, and it will be easiest and therefore most likely to last and grow if it comes from the heart. So let's bring it all together. Adaptability is about the path of least resistance. Don't try to do everything at once. If you want it, do something and let your heart guide which steps you take. You'll get somewhere and maybe even see if it's what you really wanted after all. And don't stop unless your priorities truly change. Be committed to yourself, not just the game. Knowing that sometimes you might have to take a break or change your approach is not the same as being flaky or following every whim you have. But the broad strokes should feel good when chasing the dream, and you should like it. If you spend time away from the game and find yourself still thinking about it, that tells you something, that it's important to you on some level. And if you're struggling to move forward in something you're passionate about, whatever it is, be brave and be honest with yourself. And again, I want to be clear. I tend to think it's better to not drop something entirely if you've put a lot of effort into it. You might even have others relying on you. I don't know your situation. And there are real benefits to having a craft over the course of your life, no matter how fluid the relationship is. But if something isn't working, make a small change, and then another. I'm sure you can think of examples in your life where you felt like everything was terrible, but a small change you didn't expect made all the difference in your perspective. Follow the love, and you'll be okay. Everybody around you is going through it too, and there's just not as much judgment in the world as it might seem. I know that was a lot. But thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'm so excited to organize some of my thoughts about the game and about improvement and about how it feels to care about something. I just want to be part of the conversation. So if you resonated with any piece of it, if you disagreed with anything or thought anything could be better explored, please let me know. Sound off in the comments. Add me on Discord. My Discord is Benji number 7737. Let's get some games, whatever it is. We'd just love to talk. And I'll see you on Elite Smash.